In this video, I'm going to share with you how to turn the chaos of knowledge into powerful insight with one small secret weapon you will have today, and that will be how to effectively curate. Curating will be that shortcut that allows you to take all this knowledge that is everywhere into what is personally useful to you. I will share my personal technique of generating this key insight. At the end of this video, you will be able to do a few things. One, you'll be able to read a book very quickly or any resource that you use every day. Two, you'll be able to highlight useful things in books effectively. And three, you'll be able to store those highlights in your note-taking application. In my case, I will use Logseq, but I think something like Obsidian, Roam, or any other note-taking tool that supports backlinking will work. And lastly, you'll be able to turn those highlights that you're taking into incredible insights. Let me talk about the tools we're using this. I will be using a PDF reader. I will be using Logseq, my note-taking application. I will be using a tool called Readwise. It's a paid tool. And of course, the book you want to read. Let's jump into it. First, I am on my iPad. The book I will be doing this demo with is The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. Interesting book. My starting point would be when I grab any book, a PDF, ideally EPUBs are nice, but they kind of hard to annotate and keep track of effectively. So I always stick to PDFs. Okay, so if I go here, I would first take a look at the table of content. And here I will first see what pretty much the general idea that the author is going at. Because most authors, the way they outline the table of content demonstrates their thinking of the subject matter in question. So that I would trace that as well as my starting point. Almost, I will read the introduction. The introduction gives me a lay of the land of very much an intro into the book. When introduction has been read, depending on the nature of the book, I might go ahead and read it from top to bottom. If it's a fairly more technical book or something I'm using for research, I will often just go to specifically the table of content that I'm interested in. For this, it's a book I don't know much. It's a subject I don't know much about. So I generally will read this from top to bottom. So I will be going through. Let's talk about how I'm going to highlight. So I'm going through, let's say I find and highlight that I am interested in. Perhaps, let's start with one. He's making an interesting Voltaire quote here, which is interesting. It should never repeat itself. I'm going to go ahead and say I'm going to highlight this. Let's grab this here. I'm going to highlight this block, if my highlight would work. Okay, go ahead, highlight and add a bit of annotation. And here I would annotate this as a quote. And I'm using a dot quote here because one of the tools I eventually use to process all my annotation, in this case, Readwise, this is how it converts quotes in books into tags. So we'll see how this looks a bit later. So there is that highlight. Let's go through. Perhaps as I'm going through, I perhaps want to make another highlight. This highlight, however, I want it to be with some of my own notes. And this helps us see how I actually make notes on highlights. So I will go to a section I'm kind of reading through, and here is one I think is an interesting highlight I want to make a note of. So I'm going to, or a point I want to make a note of. I'm highlighting this, and as soon as I'm highlighting it, I'm going to make my notes. Here, by the way, I'm using PDF Expert as my e-reader on this iOS. And when I want to make this note, the note I'm making here to this highlight is I will be asking a question that this highlight answers. In this case, I will be asking a question of how to beat risk. Is the point he's making here. And I say how to beat risk. So I make the highlight. I would pretty much go ahead as I'm reading through. I will be making highlights like this, highlighting, and pretty much the highlight is not just making a comment about what this is about, but I'm asking a question that this answers. And you will see when I'm processing my note how this comes into play. Now, I am done doing a bunch of, I'm going to read this through, and after a bit, I will share what all my highlights in this book looks like. When I'm done with my reading, I send it to readwise.io, and the way they accept this is you email the PDF to them and they convert into something that looks like this. So these are my highlights. This is the tag I made. In this case, I do .quote and it converts it into this quote tied to the highlight. This is a tag I called reading list, a book I want to read in my highlight, something that the author referenced. I tagged it as RL in this case, or reading list. And I have a few highlights. So this is another highlight that I made. And this is my note, the note that I added to this highlight. Often they will be in form of a question. And I have several like that. I have this highlight I made in the book. And this is my note. And you'll notice my note is it always is in the form of a question. Pretty much, I'm looking at what is this highlight? What question does this section answer? And I frame that question, or I come up with that question. Here, I can make some edits to what this looks like, but I'm going to leave it as it is. I would not make any changes here because the rest of the processing would happen in my note-taking application. The great thing, of course, with Readwise is that it also syncs to your note-taking application. In my case, I use Readwise. Immediately I take this note. Readwise does its thing. Almost every hour, about an hour later, it sends it into Logseq. And Logseq is where I do most of the processing for this book, for the notes connecting with all the things that I have going on. I'm now in my Logseq and my notes looks like this. So this is the same exact things we saw on readwise.com.io, but I spend most of my own time not in their website, but in my note-taking application because it's where all my note lives. And this is where I actually draft insight and create new insight. What you notice is the way I'm actually saving the book in my note-taking application. So for example, I would have a timestamp of when the note was there or when I'm syncing, and I have the title with some tag of some sort. I will have the name of the author. And here I have some tags. In this case, it's unsorted because I have a bunch. Immediately they come in, I need to know which I need to process. And I'm going to be doing the processes now. It has the alias, pretty much the full name of the book. Sometimes here I would also include, here I'm just clicking on that and you can see I here have a YAML, which is, it works as the front matter. Here I might also like to include the citation that I might use later. And I think this is 2022. So there are a few ways I can reference this book a little bit later in my other references. Okay, so I have this right there. What I want to point out here is this is the work. This is, in this case, the work from someone else. In this case, Mr. Morgan, is what he has said. And here I have a tag also called question. This is where the backlink in something like Logseq, Obsidian, and Rome becomes powerful. And on this, I have my own question. Now, what I would do as my way to process this is I'm going to now come here. He's saying the trick to living failure is arranging your financial life in a way that, this is blah, blah, blah. It goes into that. I would now answer this question based on my understanding of what he's saying, pretty much summarizing his point, but in my own words. So what I will have here is, what's the best way to beat risk? In this case, I would say give yourself a runway because failure might happen. So in some words, this is kind of now my own words, and here I would add additional tags. In this case, I would create a tag. I will call this risk management. So here I have this tag called risk management, linking it to other ideas or other tags that I have or ideas on risk management, and I have it here. A few interesting thing that occurs is that with a note-taking app like Logseq, it allows me to tie this single idea to its source, page 61, to the book, and I can eventually reference this in other ways. There are other great things that one can do here, but that would be for other videos. For now, I'm pressing this book. I have a way that I can reference this, do a search. I find exactly what I need in the book. I know the page number. I have the capacity to actually include specific reference to this section based on the page. And I go through. So here is where I fix my typo when I'm taking my notes on my iOS. Sometimes it's a little bit harder to type on there or to write on there. So I will come here and kind of fix the words and edit my question and pretty much go through these notes, giving it my own take, answering the questions in my own words, writing summaries of either blocks or creating new notes, and this is financial failure, or creating new notes off of this. And that's kind of how we go through, read a book, highlight, pretty much you're highlighting and asking questions on the points you're highlighting, bringing that into your note-taking application, and leaving it there so that some future time you have the capacity to come back, process it, add new tags, and link it to other ideas that you currently have or ideas that you are developing or thinking that you are going through. And this is how to take the chaos of the outside world and convert it into organized insight and knowledge that is customized just to you.